Coming up on this week's episode of TORked, crafting and crew skills are getting an update, and we'll share the important bits with you. New Flashpoints are coming to the game, and we've got the details. Plus, we'll give you the tips you need to rock the keybinds. And that is just getting started. All that and more on this week's episode of TORked. It's time for TORked, the Star Wars The Old Republic podcast with unlimited power. My name is Chris, and joining me like every single week are these two lovely ladies. Up in the top box there is Heather, and down in the box down there is Nikki. Hello, ladies. Welcome back to the show.
Hello.
Congratulations on episode 2, and I should say a fine good morning to all of the folks over in the jblive.tv chat room who are joining us and watching this episode of TORked be produced live Saturday afternoon. And this episode is fun because we're going to continue to look at the 1.2 patch, which is introducing major changes to the game. We've also got some tips and tricks we'll be throwing your way, a new question we're going to send your way, and a few other things. But I think maybe our first story we should talk about before we get into the full show here is BioWare themselves are launching a new podcast, and it's an official Star Wars The Old Republic podcast from the developers at BioWare. And it's been met with a ton of great reactions from the community. And so congratulations and welcome to them to the podcasting scene. We just beat you here by like a day. Well, by more than that, really.
Yeah, roughly.
This at first seemed like maybe a bad thing for fan-made podcasts, because let's be honest, there's a lot of Star Wars The Old Republic podcasts out there. Yeah. I have a couple of thoughts, but let's go around the horn. Nikki, what are your thoughts, and especially maybe in consideration to the impact of other fan-made podcasts now that BioWare has their own official podcast? Is this something you're going to tune into, and do you think it threatens podcasts like ours?
I certainly wouldn't say that it's going to start threatening a podcast like ours. I think this is more basically what we have in the alpha right now, 20 minutes, audio only. This is probably more along the lines of the devs having their opportunity to kind of say whatever it is they have to say in a somewhat more available, more public way, rather than having to go through the entire process of shooting all the video, getting all the game clips for the developer dispatches we're used to. So, to be quite honest, I think this is more along the lines of another way of BioWare just showing that they're willing to be in touch with their fans and things like that, rather than raining on the parade of a lot of the other tour podcasts.
And Heather, how do you feel about it?
Similar. It's, if it stays audio only, then there's going to be a good number of podcasts, of community podcasts, that aren't going to be necessarily hurt, especially if it's only, shorter. It's going to be just another source of information, which is interesting to both the community and to the various podcasts. I've got somebody from Mos Eisley Radio, which a lot of people liked, so they've got that going for them.
I think it's interesting. I think it's a really good move. It's a great community interaction move. It's one of the things where it's a fine line with community. You don't want to take too much on yourself, because that stifles the organic growth where community can kind of build up and become stronger because it's supporting those things. But at the same time, they're going to have sort of an exclusive access, and the process is much more straight line for them to go out there and talk with the devs. Now, as a competitive person myself, I'm not hugely thrilled about it. However, I do intend to listen and use those sound bites in this show, because in my opinion, this is one step better than forum posts or blog posts or interviews. We can actually get their voice saying this will happen or this is why it is that way. And then when we need to cover one of those topics in this show, we can play their clips and we can hear it from them. And I think that'll give some of the topics more of an authority too, which is good. I'm not thrilled though. My own opinion is I love the idea of this being a community effort. Of course, I'm a little biased in that area, but as a fan of the game, I'm going to listen. And, I think there's room out there for multiple Tor podcasts. That's why we launched this one. So,
yeah, it might be interesting to get the inflection of the voice of what they say instead of just reading it yourself.
Right. Sometimes when it's in words, you can kind of misunderstand some of the tone. It's a good point.
The other thing though too is with them doing a podcast and the devs getting used to having the microphone in front of them a little more often. We might also start seeing that bigger podcasts such as ours, they might be more forthcoming to actually have devs on the independent podcasts. Because all of a sudden now it's not that they're doing these things just for their own publications, but they might be more willing to step out into the community and say, I'll give 20 minutes to whomever.
That's really a great point because, like we've experienced on our other shows, a lot of times devs have never really had to deal with getting audio set up and getting a webcam set up and, how to do all the stuff to make it talk to Skype so that way you can call into a show. And you're right, this will sort of give them some experience with that. Now, they won't be doing it themselves, but maybe they'll even be able to use this studio to reach out to other shows. So like if we want to do interviews, maybe they could use the setup they've now got that sounds good because it did sound really good. So that could be good too. Great point. All right. Well, should we move on to the 1.2 patch because we've continued to chew through it through the last week, and I think this week we were considering talking about some of the crew changes and some of the crafting changes as well. And Nikki, I think a couple of these were particularly of interest to you. Do you want to kick it off?
Yeah. Some of them were. I won't go through everything.
That's fine.
For crafting and crew skills, just because there's a lot there, and based on whatever you're crafting, I highly suggest you just keep an eye on the patch notes because there's definitely some substantial changes, especially for crafting skills like the armor mech and synth weaving. I know there's been some criticisms of those two crafting skills, and they're getting revamped. But some of the things that I think are most notable is that the crit success on the custom orange gear, you'll now get augment slots. So your usual moddable pieces will now get the augment. So there's 4 pieces instead of 3 that you can augment with. The in-game crafting mats drop rates is now actually going to be decreasing, but they're now free to trade, so there's going to be an open market for them. If somebody needs something, you can pass it along, or if you're not a crafter and you have some of this stuff, you can actually pass it to your friend who is a crafter, get something made for you, like lightsaber, brand new chess piece, whatever it is you're after. And also, one other thing that I know probably drives people up the wall, they're making the voice responses based on for your companions to be accurate based on success and failure. Because I know a number of times my droid will come back and said, I failed you horribly, Master. Please don't send me to the scrapyard or turn me into Coke cans or whatever. And essentially, they've brought me back a huge amount of materials, and it's like, why are you telling me you failed?
Yeah. Yeah, the tone is always a little off when it's it's funny you mentioned that. I guess too there's a blog post they've done that covers some of this stuff as well. Now I see here it's crew skill stuff. I'm not so sure it's some of the other things, like we were going to mention crafting too. But if people wanted to read this, we'll put a link in the show notes that covers a lot of it there. I'm sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to mention really quickly back to the podcast topic because Rodog in the chat room had pointed out that one of the benefits to shows that aren't done by the devs is they can be a little more impartial. And I think that's a good point to bring up in that podcast discussion is the independent fan podcast will remain sort of more of a critical voice that has some distance and can make commentary that I don't think they can make. So sorry to change topics. I just think that was an important aspect to bring up. Nikki, was there any other things that you wanted to cover before I interrupted?
No, that's pretty much got almost all of it covered. The one thing I will add on though is the schematics. If you already know something, you pick up a schematic and you use it without, maybe you didn't check or you're like, I don't think I have that, but you do.
Yeah.
It won't consume on you, so you don't have to worry about using the same schematic twice and end up burning one and realizing you already learned that.
Right.
So I'm guessing it'll either prompt you saying you've already learned this or it just flat out won't work.
Gotcha. Okay. Heather, you have any thoughts?
Yeah, the crafting, when you crit on the crafting things, it'll give you double the quantity of stuff. In general, there is a lot of schematics added, augments to everything. I think augments, the only way to get them is through crafting. There's a whole bunch of various stuff added. The nodes for gathering, they've been tweaked so that they're not unreachable and 20 feet under the ground and such. reverse engineering. You actually now, when you're reverse engineering and you mouse over something, it'll actually give you the percentage chance you have to learn that schematic.
Yeah.
So you can kind of mouse over, a chess piece and kind of get an idea. You have a 20% chance, you have a 2% chance. So kind of give you a little bit better of idea of how often you think it might happen or how much you really want to try it.
Right. Boy, this is such a large topic we could go down. One of the things that I like that they're addressing, too, is they're improving some of the tutorial training stuff, too. They're going to be adding in spots for noobs like myself to kind of wrap their brains around this whole system a little better. I think that's a really good addition. Anything else jump out? No? Okay. All right. I mean, it's such a big topic that I think we're a little uneasy to just go all the way through it because people really, it's kind of specific to their character and their build. So, yeah, I can understand that. All right. Well, I know something else that people are looking forward to a lot in the 1.2 patch are the new Flashpoints. And we were talking about on the show, on the pre-show, on the live stream a little bit earlier. Nikki, why don't you take it? Some of the Flashpoint information, things like that. What do you got?
Yeah, they're basically releasing some new maps for us. So we're going to be getting new Flashpoint, new Operation, some new dailies, and a Warzone. So the first one, Lost Island, is new Flashpoint, is going to be available. It's going to be again continuing the storyline from the last one out, and it's going to continue on with the Rat Ghoul Plague. So it's going to be continuing the storyline from there. And anyone who hasn't played, I think it's Kaon Under Siege is the last one with the Rat Ghouls. It's got a very kind of zombie apocalyptic feel, but it's also got the Star Wars twist being with the Rat Ghouls and whatnot. If you haven't played that one, I suggest checking it out, because the new one's coming and it's just going to continue on with that.
Okay.
Next one, Explosive Conflict being a new operation, and something that a lot of MMOs maybe not paying attention to, in-game content, and we're already seeing a new operation for 1.2, and this is going to be involving a Trandoshan mercenary warlord. So we've already got something from the ancient prison on Belsavis, a hut as an enemy, and now moving on to Trandoshans, and just adding another operation, wider variety of story, and just something new for players to really sink their teeth into in-game, give the raiding guilds a lot of things to do. Next, NOVARE Coast, which is new Warzone map, and so go from raiding now to PvP. This one, its biggest feature is like Hutball, it's same faction matches, so it could be Empire versus Empire or two Republic teams, possibly mixed teams. I'm not 100% sure about that yet, but that's being added. So ratings getting a lot of love, flashpoints, PvP, and lastly, for those who are going through the grinding daily missions, one quick thing I'll mention is the new dailies on Corellia with the black hole daily tokens, which is again turns into the new gear set, which I think we'll be mentioning later.
Okay, yeah. And also, do you have any thoughts on the events that we saw were coming? They're going to be time limited, right? That's interesting. Heather, what about you? Do you have any thoughts on the events?
Yeah, they're going to be time limited. They're not necessarily going to announce. They're not going to announce everything, but there will be a chance for them to extend something if it becomes really popular. Then they said there'll be a chance to expand something.
So you just have to be in game when they announce it?
I think.
Okay.
I'm not quite sure how it will be announced. There's no advance notice that they're going to give.
Okay.
They've got a team specifically for that. There's not going to be any rare drops in an event, so it's not like you're going to get.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to get better gear. You'll probably get more social items from it.
That makes sense.
And they say if they're going to have metrics on it. So if there's some sort of major piece of it that a lot of people are missing, then they'll kind of tweak things to make it more apparent that there's more stuff over here. In general, I'm hoping that it's more of a token. If it's you have to build up to get something, if there's a chance box or take tokens to turn in for an item, I much prefer the tokens, because then you can decide what you want. Decide what you want to build up for, whether you want a couple of small things or you want a big thing.
Now, we are all members of a guild, so we should probably also mention guild banks are something people are looking forward to. Any thoughts on the guild stuff before we move on to 1.3 patch?
Yeah.
Okay.
Guild banks are ridiculously important. We have just loss management alone. I'm sitting on some stuff. We've got a number of members sitting on a number of different things that just need to go in a guild
Waiting.
bank, because right now it's just kind of like, okay, pretty much almost every day it's like somebody asks on TeamSpeak, does anyone need this? No? Well, then save it for the guild bank.
Right.
Something we're waiting on.
Yeah, guild banks are definitely something I think a lot of people are working. And you know that during that guild summit, that was probably a big part of the feedback.
Oh, yeah.
Which BioWare obviously was showing stuff they already knew was going to be in the 1.2 patch, so it wasn't that big of a reveal to show some of that stuff. Now looking at that in retrospect, but I'm sure that was an area they got a lot of feedback on. All right, well, I'm going to move on. Oh, go ahead.
One of the guild things that I did notice, there was, all the various ranks, and there's a security key, checkbox various places. So I'm not sure how that's going to work, but it might be possible that require a security key to do certain things or to pull out certain things from the bank. I also noticed to get the bank at all, it takes at least 12 members in your guild and 600,000 credits.
We have sort of now, we're going to transition from the news area of the show, and we're going to move into the how-to and sort of instructional portions of the show that I think we want to focus on from time to time. And I know Nikki has a goal to try to work in a tip at least once an episode whenever it fits. And last week we teased it, and this week we're going to talk about it. It's pretty pivotal to MMO gameplay, and that's the Holy Trinity of the group. And we're going to talk about the three different ones, and I think we'll start with a tank. Because, come on, everybody loves the tank. And, Nikki, I know you have some thoughts, so I'll let you take it from here. What are your wise wisdom? What's your wise wisdom on the tank and the Holy Trinity?
Well, the way I always term the tank is you're the leader. So you're leading the charge into battle. You're the one who's gonna
the front of the lines kind of
first,
thing?
First one to attack. You got to grab and try and hold the aggro from whether it's an enemy mob or a boss.
Right.
So the idea is that you're the biggest, toughest person in the group, so you're the one who's got to bear the brunt of the punishment, so that the other players, the support roles, who are going to be a lot more fragile, can actually have room to work. So it's kind of like, if you want to think about it, perhaps in a more military aspect, you're thinking, of course, the big, like I guess would be the armed or the heavy armor cavalry that's going in and basically taking the brunt of everything, while the support roles can then execute their more difficult maneuvers and ensure much more control of the battle. So your job basically in some cases, and it's kind of a bit of a joke in loss management times, is walk up to the really big scary bad guy, stand there and keep them pissed off and just take it.
Just take it. Yeah, that's a good explanation of the tank. Heather, what are your thoughts on the tank?
Yeah, I agree. They're definitely the ones that are kind of planning out the battle, because they're the only thing between monster and munching everyone else.
Right.
Very often, you're not gearing towards armor. You're gearing towards the best heals, the best DPS, or whatever it is. So you're not really have a lot of armor. And so you're going to get munched in just a couple bites. And he's the thing protecting everyone else. He's, there at the front lines, kind of planning, this is the person to go to next, then that one, and standing between them and everyone else.
Right. Now, the one that I think is the biggest headspace to change into would be the healer role, because it's a completely different type of gameplay. Nikki, what are your initial thoughts on the healer role in a group?
Well, since I've been playing healer a lot on my Sith Inquisitor, you're basically at the back. Your job essentially is babysit your tank and your DPS players. So you kind of have to, even you thinking your tank's going to be there taking that punishment, you got to not only watch the tank, make sure that the tank's kept properly healed and protected and not taking too much damage. You also have to keep an eye on the other teammates. So you're the biggest multitasker in the group, more than likely. There is some multitasking with the tank. If one of the enemies breaks aggro, you have to lasso them back in. But
Yeah.
with the healer, you're guarding the other 3 players in your group, or as many as another 7 in the group, depending on how things are working. So essentially, you've got to be really on the ball, because I mean, how many times have we gone on YouTube and seen nerd rage videos where the healer makes one mistake and everyone just goes absolutely berserk because they missed a heal or something. So
Yeah, you're not kidding.
the group,
When I roll healer and I mess up, I hear about it. I feel really bad.
Yeah.
the group lives and dies based on your actions. So you really got to be with it. And the worst thing that a healer can have to do sometimes is know when to actually stop healing and throw a bit of damage, because sometimes, oddly enough, the healer needs to start throwing some damage around too. So
Great point.
you, in some ways, you kind of have to be prepared to be very focused and also be jack of all trades.
Yeah, you're very on point. Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like those because it's me. I always think of it like very mathematical. It's like, how fast is this health going down? How fast is that health going down?
Right.
Try to anticipate what's going to happen. Watch, the big boss is about to attack your tank, so you kind of pre-heal some and really try not to forget yourself, because then you're trying to heal everyone and suddenly you're dead because you've forgotten to look at your own health.
So true. Yep.
And it's all about managing your mana and, knowing when how much you have, how much you can give out, and, when you can sit there and throw out the DPS, because guess what? If you throw it out, then the boss is going to be dead much quicker.
Well, let's talk about the damage dealer, because the damage dealer can, in a way, provide support for the healer, and it's an important role, and I think it's the one I've sort of accidentally found myself into. Nikki, what are your initial thoughts of the role of the damage dealer?
The damage dealer, they essentially have the easiest role because they have primarily one job description, and I think in the show notes I put something like kick the ever-loving S out of the enemies. So the idea is simply that regardless of what class you are, you need to kill and kill fast.
Heather, you have any thoughts on the damage dealer role?
Yeah, it's about getting the most bang for your buck. How you can get out the fastest and the most DPS in a fight. You can be melee or ranged depending on your own preference. So it is very focused and just making sure where you stand, what you're doing, getting the most bang out for your buck, and trying not to get hit too much, so you're not pulling the heals away from your tank.
Very true.
Because then he dies, you're getting munched pretty quick.
Right. That's a good point.
Yeah, that's something I should definitely mention for the DPS, is if your tank all of a sudden starts yelling, stop shooting, stop damaging the boss or whatever, because aggro keeps pulling, there are going to be times where you might just literally have to just stop doing what you're doing, because
hands off the keyboard.
The tank
stand there and look.
Cannot hold aggro because he or she's run out of taunts or whatever.
Waiting for something to cool down,
Yeah, because the tank, they can take the beating, whereas a DPS, especially if you're something light, like say a Sith Inquisitor who's spec'd into lightning, or a sniper, if that boss walks over and punches you in the face with a fist that's taller than you,
not going to be a happy day.
No, yeah. Now, so you combine, it's a combination of these three things that really make, it's a classic recipe that I think MMOs almost today, really, they implement it specifically to accommodate that recipe. But Star Wars: The Old Republic kind of brings another level of complexity to it with the advanced class systems. And this is definitely an area where, because I only have one character and I've only gone through it once, I don't really know much about. But Nikki, what are your impressions of how the advanced class system sort of impacts this traditional Holy Trinity?
Well, it impacts it slightly differently in that, depending on, you're not necessarily pigeonholed immediately as soon as you roll your character.
Oh yeah,
so
sure.
That's definitely something, and it does make a little bit of a difference in that, because you've picked your class and then gone through your advanced class, you're still then not necessarily totally pigeonholed to a specific role, because just based on the skill tree you're speccing into now, all of a sudden it's like, well, you went with, let's say, a bounty hunter, and then you decided, well, that you were going to go power tech because you like being more close range, you like using the flamethrower rather than you preferred shooting rockets. And then it's like, okay, well, I don't really like standing right in front of the boss and getting munched on all the time. So then you can move over to a more of a DPS role. And what that gives is maybe you're not doing the burst damage, say, as a mercenary, being the other advanced class with its rockets, but you will have then slightly more survivability because you went down the advanced class that tends to also have a bias towards tanking because there is a defensive tree. In that skill tree, in that set of 3 skill trees.
Now, Heather, as someone who's kicked around in Star Wars MMOs before, how do you feel the advanced class makes a difference in Tor?
It's pretty good. I mean, I've seen much more variety where you kind of some people can get drowned out in it. But there are a handful. I mean, there are a handful of these classes that don't really tweak to one particular. Smuggler and Imperial agent. Not really going to be a tank per se. I mean, everything is possible pretty much. You might not be the best at something.
Right. That's a very good point.
You might have to tell everyone else, kind of medium level DPS, please. Don't go all out.
Right.
You might get munched.
I think something, too, that as a person who primarily solo plays, so I don't think about this Holy Trinity very often. I think of more like a duality between myself and my companion. So when I'm playing sort of range, I have a like Kim Val who is very much up close and whacking on the person directly. So I try to offset it a little bit. But we actually have a couple examples for people who maybe don't group very often, like myself. And Nikki and Heather, maybe you guys can cover these here. We've got one for a good PvE group. Nikki, do you want to kind of cover our example well-built PvE group?
Yeah. Generally speaking, for PvE groups, and this is based on a Flashpoint example, in most cases you're going to want a single tank and healer and 2 DPS. They tend to be the strongest and most efficient group because they're going to be able to kill fast. They've got somebody who can take the punishment, and they've got a healer who can support the entire group.
And a lot of people can sort of heal. I mean, you'll be mostly DPS, but you can have some healing. You can kind of do something else. So that's something to keep in mind. So if in a fight, the healer needs a little help, somebody else can toss up 1 or 2, or, we talked about the healer knowing when to DPS, or some of the larger tanks, larger instances or places where there's a lot of stuff going on, then do you have somebody else that, can pick up an extra mob or something in case something randomly runs in? Right. Do you have some sort of contingency? Plans put in.
I always try to think of like a backup plan, even if it's just like interrupt and suspend somebody for a little while. If I get overwhelmed, try to have that available. So we have more notes over in the show notes. You can go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com. I realize people are new to the show. They might not know what the show notes are. The show notes, we post them over at jupiterbroadcasting.com, where you can download the show in just about any format you want, subscribe to RSS feed so you get it weekly, and we'll also give you links to the news stories we cover, and we break out some of our tips and tricks into text form so you can kind of read them if you miss something we talked about. So just go over to jupiterbroadcasting.com to find those. All right, should we move on to some tips and tricks from Nikki? I believe we're going to chat keybinds, and that goes pretty well together. Once you get your Holy Trinity figured out, your next step is to stop clicking on stuff and start using the keyboard, because that'll make you a better player. So, Nikki, take it away. What do we have for keybinds?
Right. So what we missed last week was why you should be keybinding. And basically what I'm referring to in large part is either some things to do with combat, or especially something I recommend you should do pretty much as soon as you log in, get through your first cinematic, when you first roll a character, start keybinding those quick slot bars. Reason being is that if you're chasing your mouse all the way across the screen to try and find what power you're over and clicking back on a target, that's slowing you down. Very much so.
And you might lose it with your, like I do sometimes. I lose the mouse cursor in really fast-paced combat.
And as Heather pointed out, in PvP, people are even smarter than the mobs. So if you lose your mouse, you might as well just lay down.
It's
Because,
so horrible.
Yeah. There are a few people who can get away with just clicking, but
Yeah, it just really doesn't hold up in my experience for a very long. There's a few things that I do so rarely that I'm okay with clicking them, but for the most part, I really have to bam. I have to hit it, or else it's too slow. Especially when you're going up against computers.
Yeah, so this is all about reaction time, being quicker off the draw, and the easy to set up. Just jump into your game preferences. It's on the key bindings tab, and in the quick slots menu, you can bind your left, right, and center quick slot bars, as well as the center bottom. Essentially, what I do is pretty much stock. What BioWare starts you off with is numbers 1 through 0, the minus and the equals key, just straight across the top of the keyboard. And it can be something as simple as that, or if you go on to YouTube, there's a number of other quick key binding videos where they'll have their WASD key and they'll have their paper bind powers bound to things like tab and R and F, and just rebinding their entire keyboard just so that all the favorite powers are easy access. And that's just something you absolutely want to get used to, is it'll make you that much faster, and also your gameplay will change because there's never going to be any frustration. And also, if you ever forget to lock your quick slot bar in your clicker,
yes,
you will rip your power off your quick slot bar, and you'll just be in the middle of a fight and
done it.
Say,
oh no,
I've done it. So lock that bar.
You'll see
definitely
some words that aren't suitable to be said on a podcast, and then you'll die and be very upset.
Yeah.
The other thing is I always play healer DPS, so I always I bind similar things to the key. So I always I get in the habit that 4 is always my heal.
Yep.
Shift 2 is always my AoE. So there are like a handful of spells that I always bind to certain places. So no matter what, for the similar classes, then I know this is where I want to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Good point.
And this is where I'll definitely mention that this is where you definitely want to consider a gaming peripheral. I'm not going to necessarily endorse any one in specific, but consider getting one of those gaming keyboards or a game pad or a fancy mouse just to make your life easier. Because if you're having to hit,
I kept our recommendations. Because we had part of this in the last episode, but we ended up cutting it at the end. I think I kept our mouse and keyboard picks in the last episode, but just in case I didn't, you quickly mention which mouse you have there, Nikki, because that one looks killer.
Yep, the one I'm using for my keybinds is Razer Naga.
Yeah.
It's the 17-button mouse, so quick review. There's 12 buttons on the side plus the regular ones on the top.
17 buttons!
So
well.
That's essentially got my number row on the top of the keyboard underneath my thumb.
I want that.
Other ones like Logitech, I think it's the G500. It doesn't have 17 buttons on it, but it has a number of thumb switches, extra buttons on the top, just to make your life a little bit easier. There's also, I think, the Steel series has the Merc Stealth, which has got a keyboard or a keypad attached to the keyboard. Razer has the Nun-C keyboard, which is specifically designed for MMOs. There's just tons of stuff out there, and you don't necessarily need to buy all of them. Just maybe consider buying one to make your life easier, because I still have a $7 Microsoft Business keyboard.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever it is, if you can get your hands on it, that's always useful. And then just realize how coordinated you are with either hand. Because if you're a right-handed person, your left hand is completely useless.
Right.
Then maybe a game pad is not the best for you.
True. Is that an issue? Have you ran into that? Because it's a great point, Heather, because I do use my left hand, I get to about the 6 or actually maybe even the number 8 on my keyboard, and any farther over in my left hand is completely worthless. You know what I'm saying? So.
Well, I'm a lefty, so my mouse hand is fairly good, but
gotcha.
I don't know how many mouse buttons I could handle and how smart my thumb could be.
Right. And now what about focus targeting? And anything in specifically you want to cover that in regards to key binding?
Focus targeting is actually something that I stumbled upon trying to make life in raiding a little bit more palatable. Because when you think about it, you've got your 2 tanks, you've got all your teammates for DPS, and you've got to watch over them. So this is something I think is really really going to help healers. It'll help some other classes too, based on how you want to, on your experience with it, and if you want to incorporate it. But essentially, what it does is it lets you bind a specific target. So what you can do, and I'll just use the default keybinds to mention them, is, for example, in a raid, you know who your primary tank is going to be. So what you can do is set them through Alt F, not to be confused with Alt F4, otherwise you're going to have a really bad day.
Yeah.
Just
So are all your
hit
companion mates.
Yeah.
So set primary tank, for example, as your focus target with Alt F, and then what you can do is it'll open up an extra piece on your user interface that will be specifically devoted to them. So what you can then do is you have this extra bar that's bigger and stands out more than any of the other bars, whether you're on raid panel or it's a regular party panel or even selecting a target. It's just as detailed as if you have the person selected. So the idea behind that is then whether you're using default keybind to select them, which is N, which I can't stand, so I rebind it to one of the 17 mouse buttons. But the idea being is that you can go and select any teammate, but at any point you can hit the focus target bind. So what you can do is, let's say I'm selecting a DPS that has all of a sudden come under fire by a group ad or something like that. I can heal them by targeting them and then quickly hit my focus target button, so default keybind in or whatever you rebind it to, and while still targeting the DPSer, I can throw a quick heal over time to the tank, which can be ridiculously handy because with the tank, because they can take more punishment, you throw heal over time on them, it'll keep them from dying, and then you can use the more focused heal on a DPS who's come under fire, basically neutralize that threat and then go back to your tank so that the primary is always up in your screen. You can always see what's going on with the primary and do a better job of keeping an eye on your teammates.
Because we have... Oh, go ahead.
I think that's pretty much it. We just have we have a new episode to tease.
Yeah, we do.
Yeah.
And also we're going to bring Mav on. So here in a moment we'll jump over. We're going to introduce the community feedback segment. But next week we're going to continue our look at the 1.2 patches. There's just a few more bits in there that we want to pull out. Honestly, every time we think we've got the things we want to cover on the show, we play with it a little longer, and there's just more stuff.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. So we've got our team on the test server. A new segment that we've been planning for quite a while. Because the great thing about this show is this is one of the shows where we really spent some time in pre-production thinking things out. And this is one of, I believe, Nikki's original ideas, the power of the Sith. We're going to delve into the dark side to see just why the Sith Warrior and the Sith Inquisitor classes are so popular, and prepare for some shocking experiences. So, we have seen the stats, haven't we? There's more Sith than there are Jedi, right?
Oh, by far.
Yep. It's something pretty big. Like the advanced class Sith Sorcerer is at 3.3% of the or 10% of the population, or 3% of the player base. Something I can't remember how the exact percentages were. I think 3.3 is the percentage, and something else, but there's the biggest or the most prolific class, Inquisitors Advanced Class Sorcerer, and then followed up right behind it is the Inquisitor's Advanced Class of the Assassin, and then right up there is Sith Warriors Juggernaut.
Right.
Because I think, you take one look at the Sith Warrior, and it's like everyone's just has visions of Darth Vader before he became teenagers. So
right.
Yeah.
I think it's really become somebody's fantasy, so that's something to definitely tune in for next week.
Yeah.
I'll share my thoughts too, because I honestly thought I'd go the Jedi route, and then it was not until I went to the character creator and I decided which route I was going to go. What were you going to say, Heather?
Yeah, I definitely like my consular and my smuggler, but I can see where, some people might like to shoot lightning out at their fingertips and pretend that they could do that in everyday life to anyone who annoys them.
Come on, shooting lightning is pretty cool. Let's be honest.
If it's enough, if it's something that can take down the legendary Samuel L. Jackson,
right?
It's got to be something to pay attention to.
That's got to be powerful, right? Yeah, because that's Samuel L. effing Jackson. All right, ladies. Well, let's move on to community feedback. And welcome to Community Feedback. Mav joins us to go over what you've been talking about in the community, what you have sent us to TORked at JupiterBroadcasting.com. And in this week, Mav's got a topic he wants to cover with you guys, and then we'll be asking a question. Mav, welcome to TORked.
Oh, good to be here. Good to feel a little on the darker side of things.
Yeah. I like your hat. It's very dark side.
Yes, the whole uniform is coming.
All right. So what are we talking about today?
Today we're talking about crew skills. Most notably, what are you in game? Are you a gatherer, a crafter, or are you a mission hound?
Okay.
Because the crew skills in this game are broken up into 3 different categories, and you can dedicate yourself to either crew skill, or you can dedicate yourself to any particular crafting. Now, there's different people out there who all they want to do is gather and sell the materials. There's people out there who all they want to do is missions.
Right.
And then there's those who all they want to do is craft. And there's a lot to craft, and it's kind of hard to specialize on any particular one. We're going to get more in depth on, what is crafting and how to maximize your potential a little later in other shows. But today, it comes to a question as to, what are your ideas to bring the crew skills up to the power of slicing? Now, it's been a question in the community. Yeah. Why is slicing so the big money maker?
The way to go, pretty much.
The way to fund yourself. And I have to admit, I'm a slicer, treasure hunter, and underworld trading.
Okay.
And I search the hell out of lockboxes, and stuff like that. So I found it to be, for me, and I started out as an artifice crafter for my lightsabers on my dark side, and I was an arms tech for my blasters and my rifles on my Republic. And I found that I was broke all the time. I was able to create certain pieces for myself, and then get that upgraded to the blue and the prototype. But I found that I was always going broke. There was a point where I was sitting there like, I'm going to have to walk. I can't take a speeder. I've hit that point before. This was early off in the game. And then I realized,
that's awful.
I need to be able to get to bank myself. And then I realized a lot of this stuff that I can get with Republic credits, I can go onto the market and just buy the mods I need, buy the the blaster barrels, and I can buy
Save
the
yourself
arm,
a lot of time too.
Stuff.
Yeah.
If there's crafters out there crafting it, and I've noticed there's certain droughts, depending on when you're on, sometimes there's plenty of stuff and sometimes there's nothing, so you're kind of SOL. And I tend to build up energy credits, go to the market and buy the maximum I can get for that level, and then I'll level whatever planet I'm on for a while until I've hit the cap, and then I'll go back to the marketplace and re-up. Now, that's not saying that's going to work for everybody. Some people like to be more involved. Some people love the crafting, but I've heard, I asked a couple of people, what do you think would make crafting balanced in compared to just slicing alone? I've heard maybe they should combine the markets to create more competition between crafters, because right now you've got, a market for the Empire, a market for the Republic. There's, I believe, a neutral market on Nar Shaddaa, where you could get stuff across the factions. But if they were to just combine the markets, would that create more of an economy, more people crafting?
It's a little, is it immersion breaking? You think maybe they don't do that because there would theoretically be sanctions in place where they couldn't do that?
I'm pretty sure
in the universe?
I'm pretty sure there would be sanctions in place. Somebody would want to control that trade market. So I can understand, as far as the Republic goes, and again, I tend to, if I flub and say the Rebellion, please excuse me. But in essence, in this time period, I don't see why the markets should be so separated, you would think. Everybody's trading. Yes, you've got the Empire trading in their secrets. You've got the Republic and the Resistance trading in their secrets. But overall, it should be a combined marketplace. I don't know if that's if that was something that was looked at, or if they, I'm sure there's stuff that, you can't, that the Republic cannot sell or use in the Empire and vice versa. I heard there are certain components, certain pieces of armor or whatnot that cannot be used cross. And I'm not
we ought to ask. We ought to just say, what do people think? They should email us, TORked at JupiterBroadcasting.com. And what do you think? Should there be combined? Should the markets just be combined? Because you can go to Tatooine and you can go to Nar Shaddaa, and if you can do it there, that's one thing. But like you're saying, for people like you, you'd see a much higher return because you're actually running into drought issues.
Yeah, I'm running into drought issues just buying stuff.
Okay.
Should it be cross-faction,
Yeah.
or should it be cross-server? Now, I thought cross-server was huge. I don't know if that's possible, but that would create a huge influx of materials or items available for purchase. So what do you think? What could you do, or what could the game possibly do in order to balance the different crafting tiers, whether it be crafting, gathering, or missions? What would you put together for it? Now, there's a chart we're going to go ahead and give you a link to that'll show you all the different connections that the different crafting abilities, the crew skills can do. But, first of all, let us know. TORked at JupiterBroadcasting.com. Let us know, what are your skills? What do you use? And what would you think to make things more balanced?
Yeah, that's a great one. Okay, dude. Well, there you go. And then as people send in, we'll bring Mav back on the show and cover community feedback stuff. And Mav, is there anything else you want to cover?
No, that's about it. If you have any questions other than crafting, or you want to see something covered on the show, please email us, TORked at JupiterBroadcasting.com.
That's right. And of course, if you want to stay tuned for future updates when Mav has the complete uniform, look forward to that. All right. Well, thanks, Mav. And that just about wraps up this week's episode of TORked. It was a big one for you. We're playing with different formats and seeing what we can fit in different episodes. So let me know what you think, if you like it long or if you like it short. Try not to be perverted about that. And leave a comment wherever you watch this and let us know what bite-sized morsel you like your episodes of TORked in. And we'll keep working towards that. And I want to say thanks to everybody who watched episode 1. And of course, thank you for watching episode 2. And we'll be right back here next week.